Hello and welcome back. In today's video, we're going to talk about systems. These can be people systems, these can be technology systems, but basically the things that help drive your business forward. Now, people systems can be things like checklists, can be things like performance items that people have to do. And in order to drive these things forward, you have something called KPIs or key performance indicators. So KPIs help to drive the human behavior towards a desirable metric. For example, if you've got a call center and you need people to make 200 calls a day, well, you can print out a sheet if you want and you have like a little tick box or they cross out little phones or something. And every time they make a call, they'll mark off that they've done the call. However, we need to be careful about driving the right behaviors. Having the wrong kind of metrics or having metrics that are perhaps not really clear enough or don't give enough context might drive the wrong behavior. For example, if you had 200 calls and someone just wanted to get 200 calls to make their money, whatever it was, and they basically call, hang up, call, hang up, call, hang up. If there was a system that just tracked that, then it would say, yes, they made 200 calls without them actually speaking to anybody, as long as somebody answered if they clicked the hang up button. That's one issue. Another issue would be if they made a lot of calls, but to the wrong types of people. So it might be that there's a minimum call length criteria, or it might be that you record sections of calls and make sure that those calls are legitimate to who they're supposed to be, and the fact that those calls might be, let's just say the metric should be getting a certain number of no's. So you know that you're going to get to a yes if you're getting enough no's in, because that's just how cold calling works or sales calling works. So if you make the call, hey, how you going? Do you have a minute to speak? And then someone who goes, no, I'm not interested. There you go. There's a no. You can tick that one off. But if someone gets into a conversation, they're like, I'll hear it out. Tell me what's going on. Then there's your yes. Or maybe if you're incentivizing the yes, if you get 10 no's for every yes, then you just have to get to 10 no's as fast as possible. Anyway, having the right KPIs can really drive positive behavior. An example of this is a call center where a whole bunch of staff were actually quite depressive about being rejected so much in their business or in this business. And so rather than it just being like call 100 people or 200 people a day, they made a little competition at the start of the day. They would say, see who could get to who's the first person to get to 10 no's. And if you're the first person to get to 10 no's, you get a lunch voucher, or you get some like half an hour off, or you get to leave an hour early or something like that. So anyway, this company that had this competition, their behavior changed because there was people in there, for example, two call operators were trying to go against each other, and one said, I would have beat you, but my customer said yes. So that was still a positive result for the company, but it also meant that now this was a fun little game instead of it being everything about the negative, everything about getting all these no's. So by getting to that point, as soon as that lunch was won or something, everybody had a more enjoyable day. They had a little bit of a laugh. That became a positive thing, and the people looked forward to it. So changing the KPI can really have a positive impact on the way that your staff respond. Another example of KPIs that can be very negative is often your sales commission structure. Sometimes people have a sales commission structure where after a certain amount of sales, they get a commission, or maybe they get a commission for every sale that goes over the line. And I've seen a business where the salesperson would discount to the max every single time because it meant that they got more sales. Whereas what you should be doing is incentivizing quality of sale as well as volume. And so perhaps there could be like a minimum profitability criteria. So we can't close the deal unless we make this much profit, or we can't close the deal, or you don't get the commission. Or in fact, maybe there's something about a limit. Yes, you can discount up to amount of 5 per week or per month or whatever. And anytime you go over that, now that starts eating into your commissionable profit. So they would then be incentivized to use the discounting very sparingly in order to get certain key deals over the line. I think discounting can be very dangerous in any organization because it erodes your margins. Doesn't matter how much you sell. If you don't make enough margins, well, you'll just be losing money and eventually you'll go broke. So KPIs help you to see a number of things. They help you to see where people are performing or not performing. They might help you to see bottlenecks, or they might help you to understand where maybe a process needs to be improved, or maybe the information increased, or the process automated, or something like that. Any high volume task is a prime target for automation. Any task that's been done on a repeated basis over a long period of time is more likely to be a good process. Hopefully we've had enough time to improve things and make it more streamlined and make sure that, like if it's a phone call thing, that the script is on point. And that'll just help you to grow your systems to help drive your business instead of it all being on one particular person's rock star skill at that. Because that's not scalable. You can have amazing stuff, that is great. But some of the best businesses run on 16-year-olds. Go and look at McDonald's, go and look at Starbucks, have a look at all these franchise businesses that have very well-structured processes. They've got very structured training. They're very particular about the way that things have to happen in terms of a quality standard. Like you wouldn't walk into McDonald's and say that it's the world's most amazing burger, but it is good enough all of the time, with very few exceptions of it being average. So having a level of scalability in your model requires that you have KPIs and systems. Having one amazing rockstar employee that is the only person in the world can do that one thing to that one standard is a problem. It's a roadblock. So how do we change that? By having good systems. KPIs don't always have to be for the sales staff in your organization. KPIs can be there for things like customer service or operational output or safety or things like that. Things that are going to drive positive outputs to your business. And not all KPIs have to be down to an individual. Sometimes they can be at the company level. So if you have a look at two metrics that are quite commonly used, one is CSAT or customer satisfaction score, and the other one is NPS or net promoter score. Now the net promoter score is kind of like a scale of 1 to 10. How likely would you recommend us to your friends or your partners or somebody else in your sphere? So a net promoter score is a 1 to 10 metric. But if you score less than a 7, it's actually a bad number, because if someone's on the fence, it's not really like they're going to promote the business. So it's a 5 or a 6 is not really a good score. A 7 is all right. An 8 is pretty good. A 9 or a 10 is where you want to be. So having a high net promoter score means that everything else in the chain has performed to a good enough level to make that customer happy. So it could be that the first interaction was that they filled out the website and that wasn't filled out a form on the website and that was a nice smooth process. Then someone called them back in a timely manner and the customer was happy with that. They were also friendly. Then the product that they got was delivered on time, it was of good quality, and when they called up about a fault or their billing, that everything was handled nice and smoothly. So you can see there's a number of sub-metrics in the fact that this net promoter score is the end metric. Now, I do know of some businesses that have a very negative net promoter score. Now, sometimes that's not necessarily something that you can escape. For example, if you are a desired service, then you're more likely to have a net promoter score that is much higher. But if you are a service that you just have to have because you have to have it, things like your registration or your insurance or your utilities bills or your phone bills, people don't go out and promote these sorts of things because everybody's just got to have the power and it just needs to work and I don't really care about it. It's not the thing in my life. They're not going to go to the barbecue and go, oh my goodness, this one power company is absolutely amazing. You have to use it. No, they're just going to say, if it comes up in a conversation, someone goes, I'm having trouble with this. And they go, oh, I use these guys, they're pretty good. So that's pretty much where your net promoter score is not necessarily going to be very useful. So you might look at a customer satisfaction score. So out of 1 to 5, how good was our service? And they could just go, it was a 5. I'm not going to promote it, but it wasn't horrendous. So we'll give it a 4 or a 5. That's fine. Another thing you could look at is in a toilet or quite often there's a little rating system like at the airport that says, how good were the toilets today? Were they clean? Were they nice? Were they smell fresh, etc.? And you can give a smiley face kind of recommendation. Another one is in IKEA. As you're going out, I think they've got a 3 or 4 face kind of thing, a frowny face, a whatever face, and a happy face. And those sorts of things really just help to give an indication of how effective that your whole work process was. So it doesn't matter what happened for each individual along the way. I think in most cases, if the customer has a pretty good experience in most areas, as long as there was nothing really bad, then they will be happy. If they had one amazing thing in amongst a sea of average things, then they'll probably still be very happy. So you need to look at the overall in that there is a certain minimum level of success in order for it to be good, and then there is a point at which you need to fix something. That's ideally what that overall score will help you to determine. Another area to look at is your systems or your technical systems. So once you've done a process long enough, ideally you should be trying to bake it into technology so you can automate it. Then it can happen 24/7, 365, and you know that no one's going to turn up sick and then not perform the thing. Obviously you can't do that with everything, but sometimes you can do that in between all of the physical things that you have to do. So by having a technical system that helps you to scale out your systems and processes, or even just put a wrapper around the way that your people do things. So you don't want to have paper-based systems. Ideally, you want to have like a workflow management system where there's different pathways. So if this happens, do this. If that happens, do that. And people can put in feedback to go, like in a cafe, it might be put the bins out, and then they have to scan the QR code to prove that they actually put the bins out. Or it might be check the milk temperature, and then they have to put in the task comes up with a time limit, do it within, between in the first 3 hours of setup. And then once they've checked the milk temperature, that goes in and it's logged and recorded. So you know that the fridges are actually doing what they're supposed to. Then you have data. You can see trend analysis. You can see, is the fridge in decline, or are we overstocking it, or is it power going to waste or something like that. So you've kind of got in that two different types of ways to collect data. You can ask a question and say, hey, were you here? Did you do this thing? Or can you fill in this information? Like with a lead form. What's your first name? What's your last name? What's your email address? What's your phone number? And then there's questions that you can ask by the system detecting it. For example, if it's our process, that maybe that person clicking the tasks off, doing them on time or not on time, you can determine that based on when the task was supposed to be completed. And then for the lead form example, you could say, well, I want to know what page they were on when they were looking at that thing. So you can grab a URL field, copy that page where you put that form, embed it into the form in a hidden field. Now you know that when someone fills out that form and that data goes into the CRM, you know exactly what page they're on. You have a pretty good idea of what they were asking for, and you can engage them in a more personalized way. One way to take that further is to think about qualitative data versus quantitative data. So quantitative is a number. So it might be number of yeses versus number of nos. It's one or the other. It's a pretty easy metric to understand. Qualitative data is something more like a body of text or a description or the way someone feels or someone's explanation of something. So was the service good or not? Yes or no. Was the service good? Yes or no. There we go. That's a better question. And then that's your quantitative metric. That's the number. That's the thing that you can count and chart on a graph. Your qualitative metric is where you might then go and read for a little bit more context. Why was your service not so great? So someone can then say, well, I didn't like there was a bad smell in the air, or the employee didn't talk to me in a positive way, or something like that. And so that gives you something that's actionable. Now, data helps you do things at scale. Depth helps you do things at quality or in depth. So having both is really, really important. And you might look for anomalies. So maybe you don't put anything. If it's just a yes, you might occasionally skim through some of the yeses. If it's a no, you might go and read all of them. Now, as the business owner, having everything run in a system allows you to collect so much more data. And then you can put it into analytics and spreadsheets and dashboards and alerts and things like that. But that just really helps you, because at scale, you can't be in every conversation. You can't be in every room, in every meeting. You can't see everything that's going on. So you need a way to identify problems before they become problems. Now, if you can identify a problem in a set of data and then make a decision, then you might be able to do that within a day or an hour or something like that. as opposed to seeing it on the balance sheet or the P&L, a month later or 2 months later. So making sure that you have live data will mean that you can stamp out a problem, fix a bottleneck, resolve an issue before it spirals out of control and becomes a much more significant issue. That saves you costs, that saves you time, keeps your customers happy, and gets you back on track faster. In order to get those data insights, you have to have a culture around using the systems. That means you have to drive the culture. Now, sometimes there can be a difference between your written culture and your lived culture. So your written culture is like your vision, your mission, your values, you write all that down and you share it amongst the team. But over time, maybe you have a hustle and grind culture, and then in real life, people are actually quite laid back and no one's sort of on point making things drive forward. So you actually got one culture that's written down and one culture that you're actually living. So you kind of need to maintain or make sure that those two mesh together and continue driving forward. Otherwise, you're not really going to get the output that you write down or that you say that you wanted. You actually have to drive it and make it happen. And in particular, the culture around using the systems. If the systems are there and people are using them, then you're going to get the data, the insights, and you're going to be able to action them. So making sure that people are putting information in the system and they're not trying to work around it or go around the outside of it or write things down outside of the platform, that's going to just slow you down and it's going to reduce your ability to have those metrics and analytics. Another valuable output of using systems is that even if you have a negative performance or maybe it's not where you think it should be, it doesn't always mean that the person is not performing or that they're not trying or they're not good at what they do. It might be that they need a bit of training, or maybe you need to write better instructions. So having performance metrics is not about this person's not doing what I expected them to do in this space. You as the founder are always going to be the one that's most invested. Most people, when they come to work, they're only 80% of their mind is there. 20% is off thinking about their personal life and what they do outside of work. But as a founder, you're purely invested. Everything you have, every fiber of your being is driving your business. But no one else is thinking that way. So you need to build the system so that 80% of someone else's drive and motivation is good enough. And you need to realize that your system, the more that you enable anybody to pick up the tools and do the work, then the more effective then your business is going to become. Back to the example of McDonald's and Starbucks, businesses that are really well structured with these sorts of systems where they can hire 16-year-olds to run the whole business, they're the ones that can scale. They're the ones that pay less for labor. They're the ones that have a minimum level of standard of quality product that goes out into the world. And they can continue to pump out the product and continue to make the money without having too much energy or effort or problems in recruiting staff. If you have that rock star person, you can't scale it. So making sure that your systems enable that. Founders have a tendency to make something oh so complicated. They're trying to optimize for the maximum level of output. And so by doing that, they might scrape something off LinkedIn with a scraping tool, then put it into a spreadsheet, then use Python code to clean it, then run it through some automation tool. The problem is that most people probably couldn't do that, or the variables that are involved or the technical background that's involved isn't always there, and you as the founder probably can't afford someone that can do all of that, and you probably shouldn't really be doing it anyway. So you need to kind of think about the process that anybody could do rather than the process that you would do, and maybe there's a hybrid of the both, but making sure that it's something that someone can easily understand. Now, if you implement a system to help drive your business automation or your business systems, make sure that it's something that is not a one and done. You don't just install it and then step back and hope for the best. It's something you need to work at over a period of time. You need to consistently be going back and making sure that you are fixing bottlenecks all the way down the pipeline, because things change in business. And if you get feedback and a customer has a particular experience, there's a good chance that somebody else is going to have the same experience. So you can either write an article, create a process, or fix something earlier in the chain by providing more information or something like that. So remember that building good systems helps you get your life back as the founder and helps you to scale the business over and above yourself. So I hope you've enjoyed watching this video. We'll catch you up in the next one.